So we either embrace the bowl and avoid the whip, or avoid the bowl and face the whip. And it's really just another way to ask the question we started with. Yes, you can trust God, but can God trust you? Luke 12, 35 through 48, and it starts like this: stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning. You could have that on a t-shirt, couldn't you? Stay dressed for action and have your lamps burning. And then if you're Chris, we're taking back the rainbow, right, Chris? So we'll have a rainbow end this on there. And be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast. Stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning, and be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast. To be a trusted servant of God, in an illustration by Jesus, his first instruction is a continual one. It's not something you do and stop. It never stops. Stay dressed for action. Stay dressed for action. Now you Bible purists probably say, well, that's not the real wording. It says gird your waist, which, of course, we've done enough Christmas plays and everything else. We all know how they dressed. And with the garment, you would roll up the bottom of your garment in the same way we roll up our sleeves today to do heavy work. That would be the men doing that. Women, not so much. But if we were to take this and turn it into a Canaan saying, if we were to put it in a parallel, Norma came to mind, because I think Norma was one of the great pushes on this. It would probably be, Norma, take your apron and tie it on. Take your apron and tie it on. Now, I want you to use a little bit of imagination. We're having a fellowship dinner. Bea has brought in her amazing pies and all of that stuff. And you see some folks running around with one of these on. What do you assume those people are doing? They are serving, right? That's why they're wearing this thing. This is our Canaan version of stay dressed for action. These people are dressed to serve in action. That's what they're doing. That's what this is really saying. So we're talking about this servant act of service. So we could say, a Canaan, get your apron on. And then the second part, and keep your lamp burning. Now this one we have to bounce back in time. Some of you, some of us, we should say, have Alexa and Siri in our homes, and we just say a word and let there be light. I suppose you could use that key phrase even if you wanted to try and be godly, and let there be light, and boom. But imagine a time when it was a real affair to light and keep a light going, illuminated. I don't know, some of you are from Big Sky Country. You moved here, you know what it's like when you're somewhere where there are no electric lights. It is dark, dark, dark. It is dark. And of course the sky is beautiful, but you'll trip as you're looking at it. So here's what goes on in there. I had to do, Chris, I almost had to call you and check my math on this, but it was simple enough. I think I got it worked out. Remember this little puppy? To scale a Herodian lamp. My first question was, how much oil can a Herodian lamp really hold? And it was 50 milliliters. I know because I poured in water and checked it. And then I looked up, what's the average burn rate for olive oil that they would have put in this lamp? And bottom line is, just in case I made a mistake, I'll just jump to the conclusion. That way nobody can pick my bad math. About an hour and a half it would take to burn that lamp, an hour and a half. And here's where it fits into our whole service thing. Consider this. Well, let's back up because we've all know this. Have you ever come home alone from a long trip somewhere and you walk in, your house is dark and everything. How does that feel usually? Scary? It can be. It feels unwelcoming anyway. It can feel kind of cold. Here you are in this dark. So imagine, no wonder we have that saying, even the hotel saying, we'll keep a light on for you. But the idea, especially in a time when it's so dark in the world, and it's kind of tricky keeping a light going, that you would come home and find lamps burning, that there would be illumination in your home. It would say a few things. It would say that robbers better not come by. There's people in there. There's life. There's security in that home. The flame would tell the whole world that if the master of the home had gone away, that the servants are doing their job. They are being faithful. They are being trustworthy. This home of this master is being taken care of. So there's a lot of that going on. But in order to do that, this is what they would have been using. These little Herodian lamps, these little oil lamps. If it burns for an hour and a half, now Jesus gives a timeline. He talks about the second and third watch, which would take them basically from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that's extremely plausible because we think we know how to party in our age. But let me tell you, the ancient Hebrews were the inventors of the all-night rave. So just so you know. And it would go on for 7 days because the idea, you only got married once in that day. And boy, you made the most of it. So it might be 7 days, it might be more. It depends how much fun they're having and what's going on. So the master would go away. Say that somewhere around an average 7 p.m. is dusk, and they start lighting the candles because, see, the servants, the master, there may be a problem, and the master may come home early. Or it may be a really good wedding, and he may be 8 or 9 days getting home. Who knows? But they will keep, since they don't know, for the length of time from 7 in the evening to 6 the next morning, they're going to keep these lamps going, and they only burn for an hour and a half at a time, which means for the duration of the time, they'll be up 5-6 times a night. For that duration, relighting these candles, refilling them, relighting the wicks, having them ready. So that's some serious intentionality. It's not just flick a switch and go to bed. These people, when they served, they were losing sleep in it. It was sacrificial. But this is what it took to be trustworthy. That's what a trustworthy saint would be doing. The men in the Greek, in the parable, doulos, it can mean steward. And keep this in the back of your mind, if you would. You know, when we talk, churches are big with the word talking about stewardship. Well, this is where the word comes from. Servants or slaves, any of these things. And in the culture, the way it would work, whether it was a slave or just a trusted servant, whoever you trust the most, it's not that different from today. Whoever you trust the most, whoever has shown themselves the most capable, they're going to be the servant above all the other servants. They're going to be the promoted guy. They're going to be the guy with the new license. So what happens in this, they end up with more authority. They end up with extra purpose, because now everybody, the buck stops here, right? They end up with extra responsibility. But most important, these two things, and this is what the parable really gets into: extra trust and extra accountability. Extra trust and extra accountability. And it really, when you reflect on this, it really turns a question on its ear. Have you ever heard anyone say, or have you said to someone else, you can trust God? You know, that's fairly common. But do we ever stop to ask, can God trust you? You can trust God, but can God trust you? Can God trust you? Here's the parallel in the modern church for the Christ follower today. Our purpose is to get our aprons on, in maybe literal and maybe figurative. That's mandate number one. Get your apron on. Get dressed for action. The second is burn your light for your master. Burn your light for your master. Our world technically may not be as dark as theirs, but it's every bit as dark morally and spiritually. And it takes just as much intentionality to get your lamp burning and keep it bright. It takes just as much. But keep in mind, by Christ's own definition, as we go through things like this parable, that's what it is to be a trustworthy servant. You got your apron on and your lamp is burning. Burn your light and listen for the knock, so that they may open the door to him at once when he comes and knocks. They may open the door to him when he comes and knocks. There's some imagery we see before. Jesus is doing that usual thing. He takes imagery used for other things and then puts a twist on it to give you yet another lesson. Where do we hear that before? God standing and knocking. Well, how about the last book of the Bible? How about in Revelation when the Master literally returns? There's a letter to 7 churches. This is in one of those letters, and guess which one it is? It's the lukewarm church. It's the lukewarm church that the letter says, put on your apron, keep your light burning, wait for the knock on the door. Revelation 3:20 goes like this: Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. You know, we're getting into the outrageous at this point. Not so much in our day, because we've had a lot of cheap knockoffs of Christianity, but in the time, no other religion would say what is about to be said in this. How did the Romans, how did the Greeks view the gods? The gods were fickle. The gods were childish. The gods you didn't mess with. You left them alone if you could. And if you had to, you would appease them so they wouldn't kill you or torture you or do some other thing. That's as good as it got. There's no talk like this. Verse 37 says, Blessed are those servants whom the master finds awake when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will dress himself for service. Wait a minute now. Did you just tell me the master's going to put on the apron? That's what Jesus says. He will dress himself for service and have them recline at the table, and he will come and serve them. If he comes in the second watch or the third and finds them awake, blessed are those servants. Some people say that's even an added beatitude. One thing is for sure, is that blessed means of the utmost good fortune. Blessed are those. There's 2 big icons, 2 big symbols, I think, that we can see brought to reality in this. And the first one is this. What does this make you think of? Oh, I heard it over there. What did you say?
Feet washing.
Feet washing, right? It's been a while since we did the foot washing part of the ceremony. We've done it here. Oh man, it's humbling, isn't it? It's humbling to let somebody do that, and it's humbling to do it. Humble service. But where did we get the idea? Why does it look familiar? John 13:3. Jesus, knowing that the Father has given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from the supper and laid aside his garments and put on his apron. I just thought I'd throw that in. That's the Canaan version. Took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. Just skipping to the end of the scene on verse 12. Do you know what I have done to you? This is Jesus talking. You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Wow, there's a reason for wearing an apron. Then it seems like Jesus takes this right-hand turn, right there in the middle of this parable about servants and weddings and masters. But he really isn't. He's doing that rabbi thing. He's taking one image and then just shifting for a slightly different focus, but it's all still to the same topic. And he shifts the picture of God from being the master of the house to something just as familiar. God is the thief in the night. God is the thief in the night. 1 Thessalonians 5:2. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. Revelation 16:15. Behold, I am coming as a thief. Interesting, God saying this, huh? I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. The way I might picture that is your house just caught fire and you have to run out in your underwear. Well, guess what? You're humiliated and in a tragedy at the same time. Why thief in the night, though? What was God thinking using this saying? Well, if you think about it, the thief in the night comes down to purpose and design. Now, the homeowner doesn't know when or if a thief will come, but the thief knows. Today, they have it down to, man, these guys are scary when they break into a place. They have it all worked out. They're going to go for certain items. They know the window. They're going to toss everything out. They have it all in order. It's an incredible, dastardly, but very efficient work. And that's really kind of what's going on. We don't know, but when God comes, he's going to do it with extreme purpose, and he's going to do it with an extreme design and set of order. And if you're not ready, well, then it's loss and tragedy. If you are, it's not going to be a horrible thing. So it's really, you can say in here, be ready or be robbed. Be ready or be robbed. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Of course, being ready in this case doesn't refer to your home security. It's not even talking about security at all. It's talking about, are you wearing your apron? It's talking about active service. Now, all of this isn't lost on Peter in this, because Peter does, bless his heart, is like every one of us as churchgoers today. The way he goes, see, Jesus just brought up something uncomfortable. If you're not ready, you're going to get robbed. You're going to lose what God is bringing. You better be ready. Very uncomfortable stuff. So Peter catches this, and he asks a question we tend to ask, but, Jesus, you know that really uncomfortable thing you just taught? That's not for us, right? That's for those bad people who don't come to our services. Well, at least it's for the guy in the other row. It's not for us super Christians, right? Jesus pulls another rabbi trick out. It would be so easy. He asked a question. Peter asked a question. It's a yes or no question. It could have been answered yes or no. But rabbis and good teachers know this, is that we seldom learn really from a yes or no answer. Not really. What do we learn from is when we have to figure out the answer for ourselves. Then you own it. So how does Jesus reply? With yet another question. And he just takes the same parable and starts making it more pointed. And he continues on with, who then is the faithful and wise manager? Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom his master will set over his household to give them their portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. You got the backdrop, right? We're not sure when the master's coming. You may be serving a lot of meals before the master comes and pats you on the back. It's an uncertainty going on. But if the servant says to himself, my master is delayed in coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know. Blessed is the guy who's awake. But this guy, this doomed servant, he makes a number of mistakes, doesn't he? He miscalculates his master. Now, notice this. He still believes the master's coming. He's not an unbeliever. He's not a non-servant. He believes the master's coming. He just thinks it's so far off, it's not relevant to him. Not my worries. Second thing he does wrong is he's been entrusted. He's been given a trust. And he betrays the trust the master put in him. Trust is a precious thing, isn't it? It's precious between people, husbands and wives, friends. Trust is precious. How much more precious is God's trust? Third mistake the guy makes is this. In his betrayal, he squanders the master's wealth. He squanders the master's wealth. And when it talks about eating and getting drunk, what's he doing? He's using all this stuff for his own pleasure. That's what, metaphorically speaking, he's using everything, all these blessings, and using them on himself only. Which really kind of leads to the next thing. He abuses the master's people. Not only is he squandering the resources and all of this is going on, he's hurting the very people that are under the master's protection. And the last thing is he doesn't realize that he thinks things are going so cool, and he's heaping one unbelievable catastrophe on his own head. Doesn't realize what's coming down. Well, how does that parallel the church in our day? Well, I think we have to sit back and ask ourselves a little bit, how many of us in our Christian walk really live out our Christian faith like the clock is ticking? Like there really is an urgency of time. Do we obsess over our idea of wealth while missing God's idea? Are people, seeking people who come to churches, who come to our home where we are servants, has anyone ever been wounded or abused in a church? Accountability. That's what it's all about. We will be accountable. We will be accountable. Accountability, and an accountability against a limited time. Because there's a real certainty to this. On one hand, we say, well, we don't know when God's coming back. However, we do know that we only have a limited lifespan, and if God doesn't return to us, I can guarantee you we're returning to God. So one way or the other, we're going to face the accountability. Do we squander God's wealth? Now, here's a place to stop and pause, because do we really understand what the master's wealth is? When we have our idea when we say wealth, but what does God mean? What does the Bible really mean in its teaching when it talks about wealth? Well, we can be honest about this. If I were coming up here and I were to say, today is a sermon on good stewardship, what would be the first thing to cross your mind? Money? Probably tithing. Now, if you're really super Christian, you might think time, treasures, and talents, and so you throw in, well, maybe you'll talk about time and using my gifts and stuff as well. But that seems to be where we are. What if I told you, I would challenge you actually to this, do a word study on the word steward or stewardship through the Bible, and you'll discover something really, it never talks about money. Never. Not directly. Sometimes it's used as a metaphor, but it never talks directly about money. So God's idea of wealth must be something different. If it's not these things. Psalm 50 tells us God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. And the Canaan version is God owns the real estate on 1,000 streets. Money is not God's concern. Money is not his big concern. So obsessing over money cannot be good stewardship. It doesn't fit the teaching. Even the use of our time, it's important. Now, granted, we have to be wise with the money. We have to be wise with the time. We only have so much. But do we realize that as we look at God's idea of wealth, it's not even time? 2 Peter 3 tells us that a day in the mind of the Lord is like what? 1,000 years. And what is 1,000 years like? A day. Time is nothing to God. He can give and take it at his will. The only thing, and Peter points out, God is not slow and he's not fast. His timing is perfect to keep his promise. So time isn't the wealth. Do you know, even the gifts that God gives us, and if I say spiritual gifts, not just natural talents, spiritual gifts, even that is not the wealth. The stuff that God gives us. 1 Corinthians 12 tells us the Holy Spirit bestows on us gifts as who wills? As the Holy Spirit wills, right? God is limitless in the gifts he can give. There's no problem. There's no shortage. There's no limit. Now, all these things are important things. Don't get me wrong. But they are secondary to what is the real wealth. The real wealth. So what is the real wealth? What is that thing that we can't squander? Well, I thought they were going to have this entirely figured out by the end of Sunday school. They were, boom, right on this topic once again. So I was just thrilled, sitting back listening to what was being said. Let me read you some things, and let's see if we figure out what God's wealth is. 1 Corinthians 2:11 and 12. No one knows the things of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may know the things that have been freely given to us by God. Romans 11:33. Oh, the depths of the riches, both of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. Colossians 1:26, the mystery which has been hidden from ages and from generations, but now has been revealed to his saints. To them God willed to make known what are the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles. Based on those few verses, what would you say the wealth of God is? Another curiosity question, really. What impression are you hit with? What is the wealth of God then?
The image of God.
The image of God, okay.
Or to allow
To know him.
to allow the Spirit to manifest itself through us as a steward of something that doesn't belong to us. We don't deserve that.
We don't deserve it, that's for sure.
But yet we're allowed by His grace to let His Spirit show through. I mean, if we can do that, that's eternal wealth. If we can allow His Spirit to work through us in a way, through His Word and through His Spirit. I mean, when I think of steward, I think of told me something that I don't deserve or doesn't belong to me.
Very much in the parable, isn't it, Steve? Steve says, I think of steward holding something that doesn't belong to me, and that's the whole parable, isn't it? The servants don't own any of the stuff they're entrusted. Now, Chris got all fancy and said, Imago Dei. Yeah, Deo. Says, even the Latin goes away when I stand up here. And then Morgan said something more that I can pronounce. What did you say, Morgan?
To know.
It just doesn't get any more simple, does it? It comes down, every one of the verses we looked at was to know him. Who are you? Who am I that I should know anything about the real God? Who am I that he should reveal? Because if he doesn't reveal a knowledge, I will not know. I'm not going to figure out God. The wealth of God is God's knowledge, God's wisdom, God's mysteries made known, God's Spirit understood, God's transformation. That's the wealth. Now, offered, of course, to us in perfect love, but also in perfect justice. Everything else, all those other things that's so easy to get a handle on, these physical things, they're simply tools. They are simply the extension of the knowledge. The knowledge is the wisdom. Which brings us to a very disconcerting part of the parable. The parable doesn't involve unbelievers. It's actually, all of it's about servants, right? Real servants in the home, ones that are entrusted in the home. It's all about servants. It's about us. And yet it still talks about punishment. It says, verse 46, those untrustworthy servants, and he will cut them to pieces and put him with the unfaithful. Those who are not living up to this trustworthiness that we've talked about, all of this, those who have not used the wealth right, those who have abused those who are entrusted to them, will be cut to pieces. And that sounds pretty severe. Now, wait a minute. We're a bunch of good church people. What's this about some of us getting cut to pieces? Where does that imagery even come from? Well, let's think about it. The word in the Greek, actually, it's a compound word. It means to twice cut or to again and again cut. Now, it can refer to an execution such as, like Isaiah, put in a log and saw it in two. But it can also mean to cut again and again. So here's a question for you. In the time of Jesus, what was a common form of punishment where people were cut again and again? I'm sorry? Flogging. Yeah. Now this brings us into the second of the icons. We've got this and we've got this. At one point, I wanted to make a flagrum or flagellum that the Romans would have used. I really want to get an idea. Because I learned enough, we refer to it sometimes as the cat of nine tails. And it had bone shards, and it had metal shrapnel and balls. And it was so brutally efficient. I thought about it with the metal balls. So you had weighted metal to pulverize the flesh, and then little knives to cut the pulverized flesh. That is getting cut to pieces, isn't it? As a matter of fact, it was so efficient that there was the 39 or the 40 lashes minus one. Why? Because the average person would not survive 40 repetitions of this, because you were literally cut to pieces. Well, let me just throw in another question. We understand this as an icon that if you were a slave and this was going to be your fate, man, it's a bad day. Now you're wishing you would have done what you were supposed to do in the first place. But that's not only a servant comes to mind. Who else comes to mind when we talk about a flagellum or flagrum whip, cat of nine tails? Jesus. Wow, because punishment falls on someone, And even as he's using this as an icon, as a symbol of the punishment of sin, of hell, really, to come, he's talking about his own destiny. He's talking about what atonement will involve. Could it be that a God's servant could be counted with the unfaithful? Because back on that thing, if you are a bad servant with the unfaithful, I mean, wouldn't they just be a bad Christian? Wouldn't they just be, a bad Christian? But it says they're counted in with the unfaithful in this case. And in the Greek, the word does mean not believing. They're counted in with the people who do not believe. Kind of scary. Do we see that teaching anywhere else? How about Matthew 7:21? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. It is possible. All you have to do is be not doing what you were entrusted to do. Then in the parable, Jesus says something that seems to go against our grain. Did you realize God grades on a curve? We tend to, it's like, what? God grades on a curve? What are you talking about? Well, it goes on like this. And that servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. Let me say that again. And that servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a light beating. That needs some reflection. It's like there's two different levels of punishment going on. Here's my proposal to you, what's going on. He's talking about knowing people as in people who know, and not knowing people as in people who do not know. And so we think, well, then who are the not knowing believers in here? Who would they be? What came to mind to me would be something like this. We are all aware of places like China, where the house movement took off. Devout people sacrificing way beyond us. But they live in an environment where Scripture is very hard to come by. Very hard. And to be honest, some of the theology that they have come up with, there's gaps in it that is jaw-dropping. They can believe some pretty not very true things. But they believe up to what they could get their hands on. They believe and they act on it way beyond what we do. They do wrong. Well, according to Jesus, then there is the light punishment. But how about the knowing people? Are we knowing people? Let's think about this too. And now let me qualify this. This isn't like, well, I just won't know anything, so then I won't have to worry. No, it's not how much you actually know. It's what God has made available for you to know. In the capacity of your mind and heart, in the country you live in what you're allowed to grasp and get materials on. How about us? How do we? For the average pastor, I still marvel at this. I'm still completely in gratitude for this. When I sit down to prepare any message, or Chris or Steve or anyone else, we have the whole world literally at our fingertips. Every commentary, everything. Anything we want to look at, a few keystrokes and we can find that information. Chances are some of you are sitting here with a Bible app on your phone. How many people have a Bible app on their phone? Okay, there's a crowd of them. Chances are in your Bible app, I know if you've got kind of a heavy-duty one, you can have, I had one that had 24 translations of the Bible on it, plus the Greek and Hebrew, plus a way for me to interpret or to translate the Greek and Hebrew. I have in that little device, like you, more than a pastor even dreamed of a generation ago. That's some pretty serious knowledge going on there, isn't it? How about the experience of God's working? Because there's knowledge straight, and there's wisdom, and then there's the experience, the imagio. Say it for me, Chris. My Latin's not working today.
Imagio Deo.
There we go. One more time, real loud.
Imagio Deo.
Okay. We could have everybody say that, but I can't say it, so I'm not going to say it. The idea of the image of God, that involves experience. It's just not book knowledge. It involves experience knowledge. I give you a simple example, even right here, today. It started, I just week after week now, I just look for it. Go into chapel prayer. Somehow the prayer's on the topic. Go into Sunday school. Man, somehow they're already working it out on what the main focus is today. God, on a routine basis, gives us this miraculous coordination, because we're not exactly a coordinated church. But somehow God does that. But it does raise an uncomfortable question. Let's say you've got a really mediocre pastor. And everybody's staring at me and says, yeah, that's it. You got it. But even that mediocre pastor has access to all the knowledge and wisdom of God in the world to draw on for whatever the focus is for that week. Surely there's something in there to be known. Surely. So what if our routine is to fall asleep during sermons, or blow it off as in, well, I'll take some casual consideration of that, and that's as far as I go. Is that living up to the wealth of God? Is it living up to the wealth in a very practical way? And all of this comes to a conclusion for us, and it's very sobering when we realize we are the knowing people. You people with the amplified, translated, direct from Hebrew and Greek Bibles, and your study Bibles, and your illustrated Bibles, and your commentaries, and your concordances. All of these things we have to use as tools, all of us. And he says this, everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. To those whom much was given, much is required. Where does that place us? So we have these two icons that float through the entire New Testament. We've got a foot washing bowl. We've got the foot washing that is an icon of, right in the parable of the master's going to take care of the servants in this, the good ones, the trustworthy ones. What is this all about? It's about humility. It's not just about being active, it's about God-directed service. And I'm sure the deaconesses would appreciate this. It's wonderful if you showed up with an apron on and you were going to help them in doing a dinner. But if you run off and decide, well, I got my apron on, I'm going to go sweep the parking lot or, dust the furniture or something. It's no, that's not doing what you're here to do. And God says the same thing. So when it comes down, this is an example for us to follow. It's something that is the nature of God himself. And then we have the whip. We have the cat of nine tails, brutal punishment, but also part of the cost of atonement for Christ. There's no middle ground. Here's the parable. This or this. It's the only thing. Jesus doesn't leave anything in between for us there. And what that comes down to is this. If the believing servant, the believer servant, lives up to their accountability, what they will do is they will embrace the bowl and be spared the whip. If they shirk their accountability, they will avoid the bowl and be destined for the whip. That's the way the parable comes down. And it has to be that way because you and I don't face the whip because the Master has already faced it for us. And as long as we are in His trust, we are covered in that way. So we either embrace the bowl and avoid the whip, or avoid the bowl and face the whip. And it's really just another way to ask the question we started with. Yes, you can trust God, but can God trust you? And I'm not going to try and pull myself to some great ending on this. Instead, I'm going to fall back on something. In the 1970s, we saw a shakeup in the church, a big one. We called it the Jesus movement. And there was products of some pretty amazing people came out of that movement. And there was reflection on the church that was pretty sobering. So as we get ready before the benediction, we're going to listen to a song from that period.
Do you see all the people sinking down? Don't you care? Don't you care? Are you gonna let them drown? How can you be so numb not to care if they come? You close your eyes and pretend the job's done. Oh, bless me, Lord, bless me, Lord. You know, it's all I ever hear. No one aches, no one hurts, no one even sheds one tear. But He cries, He weeps, He bleeds, and He cares for your needs. And you just lay back and keep soaking it in. Oh, can't you see it's such sin? 'Cause He brings people to your door and you turn them away as you smile and say, God bless you, be at peace, and all heaven just weeps. 'Cause Jesus came to your door. You've left Him out on the streets. Open up, and give yourself away. You see the need, you hear the cries, so how can you delay? God's calling, and you're the one, but like Jonah you run. He's told you to speak, but you keep holding it in. Oh, can't you see it's such sin? The world is sleeping in the dark that the church just can't fight, 'cause it's asleep in the light. How can you be so dead when you've been so well fed? Jesus rose from the grave, and you can't even get out of bed. Oh, Jesus rose from the dead. Come on, get out of your bed. How can you be so numb not to care if they come? You close your eyes and pretend the job's done. You close your eyes and pretend the job's done. Don't close your eyes, don't pretend the job's done. Come away, come away, come away with me, my love. Oh, come away from this mess